One of the weirdest prospects for the 2024 NFL Draft is wide receiver Lad McConkey from Georgia. At first glance, he doesn't look like a guy who belongs anywhere near the NFL. I don't mean that in an offensive way, but Lad McConkey's not your typical athlete. He doesn't look like he's 6'4", he doesn't look like he's built, and he just doesn't come across as your typical first or second round draft pick. But looks can be deceiving. Lad McConkey's one of the quickest players in this year's draft, has all the mental skills to have a long tenure in the NFL, and has both the production and the potential to really help an NFL team. But how the heck did this guy get to this point? Just a couple weeks before signing day, McConkey had no Division I offers and didn't even have a 24/7 sports profile. In a little bit of time, he gained multiple SEC offers, committed to Georgia, and then went on to have a crazy career there. In today's video, we're going to talk about how all this happened. We're going to talk about the incredible story of Lad McConkey, go through his nuts recruitment, how he did at Georgia, and why scouts are really high on this guy. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, let me know what player I should do in my next video, and also don't forget to turn on post notifications, leave a like, and let me know who I should cover next. I'm also going to be joined by Andrew from Saturday Shenanigans once again, so check out his channel and be sure to support his work. Now let's get started and talk about the insane rise of Lad McConkey. In order to understand how Lad got to this point, we first need to go back in time. We're also going to go to northern Georgia, as just a couple years ago, everybody had their opinion and something to say about this kid named Lad McConkey. Football ran in his family, as his older brother was a starting quarterback at North Murray High School and ended up going to both Presbyterian College and West Georgia. Not the highest level of football, but still very good. Going back even further, his dad was a standout player at Dalton High School and was pretty legendary there. In terms of football, it dominated the family, and so did one school. They absolutely loved the SEC, and Tennessee ruled that family. McConkey said, quote, "We grew up in a Tennessee household, so there's that." Throughout much of his life, he had spent most of his fall weekends wearing orange and white, as he was inside the stands at Neyland Stadium in Knoxville, Tennessee, not Athens, Georgia. Lad loved sports from a young age, and was always seen as a quick kid who could play football, basketball, and run track, and it was evident he had some potential in elementary school. Northern Murray head basketball coach Tim Ellis said when he got the job, he kept hearing about these talented 5th and 6th graders. So he went and checked him out. He said, quote, "I see this little curly-haired, skinny, knock-kneed kid just going around everywhere. That kid can get after it, he can play, and he plays hard." He eventually got better and better, and when he arrived at high school, he would follow in his brother's footsteps. He ended up playing right away, but wouldn't really get noticed until he was a sophomore. He started to become a big deal on the team, but at the end of the season, he got hit with a roadblock. McConkey tweaked his right ankle, and after initially leaving it untreated, it would continue to get worse. He said, quote, "I played through it, and I thought it was just a little something. Then I got tackled, and it ended up being fractured." He missed the entirety of the basketball season, and would spend his whole summer doing physical therapy, alongside taking visits to the chiropractor. His coach said, quote, "He was really upset about missing a lot of stuff. He was frustrated about being hurt all the time, and he wanted to be out there, and the frustration only made him stronger." He'd end up playing another year at wide receiver for his team, but after his junior campaign, he was asked to make a switch to quarterback for his senior season, which he happily said yes to. Their head coach said, quote, "McConkey was the most dynamic player he's ever coached. For the Mountaineers, he played all over the field. He spent time at quarterback, wide receiver, defensive back, punter, and kick returner." As a senior in 2019, he helped lead his team to their first regional championship, their first win over a rival in a long time, and their first appearance in the Elite Eight. They ended up finishing 11-2, and he had video game-like numbers. On the year, McConkey had 143 carries for 924 yards and 10 touchdowns, threw for 1,700 yards and 20 touchdowns, had 3 kickoff returns for 160 yards and a touchdown, 4 punt returns for 196 yards and 2 touchdowns, punted 22 times for an average of 35.5 yards per kick, had 17 tackles, had 4 interceptions, 3 of which went to the house, and 7 pass deflections. Honestly, that is actually a proper use of the word video game numbers, as he literally did everything. While he was good, he was barely getting recruited, and he had a very bizarre story. It started when he ran a 10.8 100-meter time during the spring, and after that he got his first offer from William and Mary. Earlier in 2020, he was getting ready to take his official visit to Army, and had a couple of others lined up to Chattanooga and Jacksonville State. But in mid-January, everything would change. He was trying to decide between Army, Chattanooga, Coastal Carolina, Furman, and Jacksonville State, and then he got invited to take an official visit to Georgia. This would happen in the final week of the month, and no one ever really saw this one coming. No one thought he'd actually get offered, but it did. He said, quote, "It was kind of surreal. It was an exciting moment and really crazy for me and my family, and we just tried to take everything in and take a deep breath, but it was really crazy. It was definitely a blessing and a very special moment. It was a huge offer for Ladd, obviously, but would his dream school come in and try and do something? If the Tennessee Volunteers offered him, he said it would make things really interesting, but I don't believe that ever ended up happening. What's also interesting is his grandfather passed away on January 20th of 2016, and that offer would come from Georgia on January 20th of 2020. It was a very special day for him, and he was also a very special football player. He had over 3,000 all-purpose yards in 2019, and he was the perfect guy for Georgia's system. He said, quote, "Georgia offered me to be a true slot guy. They want guys that can win a one-on-one battle, and they want guys that can get in the space down in the slot and make people miss in tight coverage. They could definitely get that with Ladd, but there was one issue. The guy was small." He said, quote, "At the end of my senior year, I was a $165 soaking wet." He said that smiling. Ultimately, he would decide to bite on the Georgia offer, and in February of 2020, he would ink with the Bulldogs over Vanderbilt. He would now be headed to a premier SEC school, and he said, quote, "It really felt like home. Everyone told me I'll know when I'm at the right spot, and that's how I felt with Georgia." He felt it was the best fit for him, but many outside of Georgia didn't really notice this guy or care. They had the #1 class in the country, and Ladd was just one of those good stories who was thrown an offer at the end who would transfer after 1 year. At least that's what many were thought. But many forgot how good he was and also how fast he was. He was an absolute burner, as he ran a 40 in 4.44 seconds and also ran a 4.12 short shuttle time. They're also getting a guy who was a great leader, an extremely hard worker, and he had an elite mind. Scouts did not factor that in, as according to 24/7 Sports, he was a 3-star recruit, the number 166 wideout, and the 1,131st best player in the class of 2020. So how would Ladd do at Georgia? I'm going to turn it over to Andrew from Saturday Shenanigans, and he will now talk about that.
Ladd McConkey arrived to Athens to the first day of fall camp in 2020 just a slender 165 pounds. He was listed on the roster as heavier, but he assured us in interviews that he was a stick. Football during the pandemic was wonky for all programs, especially with the late start. Georgia kicked off their season on September 26th that year with no non-conference play. This was a perfect time for McConkey to take a red shirt, gain size, learn the system, and develop his game. And that's exactly what he did. He said, quote, "I've always kind of struggled gaining weight, but when I got here, our strength staff and our nutritionists are great, and they put the weight on me." Unfortunately, Georgia lost games against Alabama and Florida and missed out on the playoffs in 2020, but they were still ranked number 7 in the final AP poll. McConkey was ready to prove himself as a target for the Dogs going into the 2021 season, while hopefully helping them get back to the national title, where they felt like they belonged to avenge their loss to 2018 Bama. Ladd gained over 10 pounds of pure muscle before Game 1 of the 2021 season against Clemson. That fact, coupled with injuries to other players in the wide receiver room, such as George Pickens and Jermaine Burton, he got the start, and it was a huge moment for him. Although the stats weren't eye-popping, 2 catches for 12 yards, it was a good starting place. The Bulldogs won 10-3. His first career collegiate touchdown came in a Week 4 win against Vanderbilt with a 12-yard pass from JT Daniels. Scott has made a video on Daniels, you guys should go check it out. McConkey's next most memorable moment from that season is when he caught a big-time touchdown against Alabama in the SEC championship game. He also caught 2 short passes in the college football playoff semifinal versus Michigan in a blowout 34-11 win. And as the cherry on top, he secured 1 catch in the national championship revenge game against Bama, and in the 2021 season, he concluded the year with a total of 31 receptions, 447 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He was named to the freshman All-SEC team. Keep in mind, this was on a team loaded with wide receiver talent, and he was only a redshirt freshman. Ladd McConkey was a national champion. What better way to start his career? And the great part was, he was just getting started. In 2022, with the second leading wide receiver Jermaine Burton transferring to the Crimson Tide, Ladd would need to step into a bigger role. And it didn't take him long to show the entire world this, because in Game 1 of the season against Oregon, he had 5 receptions for 73 yards and a touchdown. His 2 best games this season were on 2 of the biggest stages. Yet again, while facing at the time number 1 ranked Tennessee, he showed out with 94 yards on 5 receptions, which is 19 yards per catch, by the way, and he also caught another touchdown pass. Georgia was absolutely dominating everyone that year, and they were cakewalking to another national title game. In the SEC championship game, Ladd got another tutty before he left the game early with knee tendonitis, but ultimately, he'd be fine in the coming weeks. Then in the national championship versus TCU, which we all remember for being such a terrible blowout, he racked up 2 more receiving TDs. Georgia won in a historic national title 65-7, just to prove that they were one of the most dominant teams of all time. Yet again, McConkey finished another season with the ring as a national champion. His numbers all around significantly improved in year 2. 58 receptions, 762 yards, and 7 touchdowns, earning the second team All-SEC mention. 2023 was going to be crucial for Ladd McConkey. As we know, junior year is when players make the big leap in their draft stock, but unfortunately, after staying primarily healthy for his first 2 full seasons, he caught the injury bug before he could even see Game 1. In August of 2023, he sprained his lower lumbar that caused him to miss an entire month. He eventually saw the field for the first time on September 30th against Auburn, and he caught 4 passes for a modest 38 yards, but Dogs fans knew he wasn't playing at 100%. Then on October 28th, he started a 3-game stretch where he found his groove and dominated. Against Florida that day, he caught 6 passes for 135 yards and a touchdown on 22.5 yards per catch. In the next game against a 12th-ranked Mizzou, he put up 95 yards on 7 catches. Then the following Saturday against a top 10 Ole Miss team, he only had 4 catches but 81 receiving yards and a touchdown. But the fun would come to an end for McConkey as he once again got injured. This time it was an ankle sprain. Even without him, Georgia had finished the 2023 regular season undefeated on an overall 28-game win streak. When they needed him most in the SEC championship game against Bama, he returned, but he wasn't fully himself. He only had 3 receptions with 38 yards as the Bulldogs lost, ending the streak and missing out on the college football playoff. Ladd finished the year playing in the Orange Bowl massacre against Florida State, where he showcased his athletic ability in an insane 27-yard rushing touchdown where he put the entire defense on skates. His final stats from the year were reminiscent of his redshirt freshman season, although he played in 6 less games this time, 30 receptions, 478 yards, and 2 touchdowns. His time on the field was limited, and it was clear to everyone that he was an NFL-caliber talent. On January 1st, 2024, Ladd McConkey decided to forego his senior year at Georgia and declare for this year's NFL Draft. Despite all the worries about his injury history from NFL scouts, he made a lot of people forget about it when he showed up and balled out at the NFL Combine in March. He ran a 4.39 40-yard dash and looked great amongst his peers in the position-specific drills. According to scouts, his upsides are his polished route running ability, good hands, and vertical speed, and his weaknesses include his strength at the line of scrimmage, deep ball tracking, and of course, the injuries. But people still see him panning out as a great slot receiver in the NFL. In the latest mock draft, he has even been projected to be picked late in the 1st round. What do you guys think the future holds for Ladd McConkey? As always, Scott, thanks so much for having me on. If you guys love college football, check me out, Saturday Shenanigans.
Yeah, I appreciate Andrew coming on and talking about Ladd, and McConkey's one of the weirdest stories. Currently, he is projected as a 2nd-round pick, but with his speed, production, and ability to take a hit, I think he'll end up being a guy who gets taken in the 2nd round. He's someone who, in my opinion, is going to always catch the ball, is always going to get open, and low-key kind of reminds me of someone like Hunter Renfrow. He's going to be a pain to opposing defenses, is going to be smarter than most defensive backs, and is always going to find a way to get catches. He may not score a lot of touchdowns, he may not get many Pro Bowls, and he may not go down as the best receiver ever, but I think Ladd is going to be a consistent dude who makes plays, makes catches, helps the locker room, and helps his team win football games. That's what he did at Georgia, and that's what I think he'll do at the next level. But what do you guys think? If you're a Georgia or NFL fan, what do you think of Ladd McConkey? What do you think of his translation to the NFL? And what other receiver or prospect should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.